So we're starting on page 55. The avatar and his circle is the subtitle. When the avatar takes an incarnation, he has before him a definite mission, the plan of which is adjusted to the flow of time. The process of the incarnation of the avatar is unique. Before taking on the physical body and descending in the world of duality, he gives to himself and the members of his circle special types of sanskaras, which are known as Vijnani sanskaras. The circle of the avatar always consists of 120 members. All have to take an incarnation when the avatar takes an incarnation. The taking on of the Vijnani sanskaras before incarnating in the physical body is like the drawing of a veil upon himself and his circle. After incarnation, the avatar remains under this veil of Vijnani sanskaras until the time comes, which has been fixed by himself, that he experiences his own original divinity and begins to work through the Vijnani sanskaras transmuted into the yoga sanskaras of the universal mind. Vijnani sanskaras are the ordinary sanskaras of duality, though essentially different in nature. The Vijnani sanskaras prompt activities and experiences caused by ordinary sanskaras. But while these activities and experiences have a general tendency to strengthen the grip of duality, the activities and experiences caused by Vijnani sanskaras work towards loosening that grip. The logic of the working out of the Vijnani sanskaras necessarily invites the realization of the oneness of existence. They are, therefore, known as a threshold to unity. The members of the circle remain under the veil of Vijnani sanskaras until they get realization of God at the time fixed by the avatar. Then the Vijnani sanskaras they have brought with them become yoga sanskaras, serving as an instrument for the fulfillment of the divine plan on earth. Got a subtitle, difference between Vijnani sanskaras and yoga yoga. There is an important difference between Vijnani sanskaras and yoga yoga sanskaras. Though Vijnani sanskaras work towards the realization of unity, they bring about the experience of being limited. But the yoga yoga sanskaras, which come after realization, do not interfere with the experience of infinity. They serve as instruments for responses and activities in the dual world. The working out of Vijnani sanskaras contributes towards one's own realization, while the working out of yoga yoga sanskaras contributes towards the realization of others who are still in bondage. In the beyond state, time, space, and the world of phenomena are non-existent. It is only in the phenomenal world of duality that there is space or time or the operation of the law of cause and effect. So when the master works in the sphere of duality to uplift humanity, his work becomes subject to the laws of time, space, and causality. And from the point of view of external work, he appears to be limited, though in reality, he is experiencing the oneness and infinity of the beyond state. However, though himself beyond time, when he works for those who are in duality, time counts. Elizabeth, would you like to read? Unmute yourself. I guess she's not at her machine. So, Ernie, could you unmute yourself?
Special working for the circle. The master's work towards humanity goes on without break through the higher bodies. But when he works for the members, his circle, his action is subject to a time which he himself fixes for a precise and definite intervention in the mechanical working out of their samskaras. Therefore, those who followed the instructions received from the master and abide by the time given by him have the benefit of his special working. For the task the master sets before himself, time becomes an important factor. The working which the master undertakes in relation to the members of his circle not only touches and affects them, but affects others closely connected with them. The circle constitutes the most important particular feature in relation to which and through which the master carries out his spiritual duty to humanity and comes into existence as a result of the links of several lives. Every master has a chance of very close disciples.
That's has a circle.
Oh, thank you. Every master has a circle of very close disciples that does not create a limitation in his inward consciousness. In his God state, the master finds himself in the center of the universe, and no circle circumscribes his being. In the infinity of non-duality, there are no preferences. The circle exists only in relation to the work the master has undertaken in the phenomenal world. But from the point of view of spiritual work in the phenomenal world, the circle is as much a reality as the Himalayas, as the Himalayas. Oh, that was the end of that sentence. 9. The ways of the masters. The masters are impersonal and universal in their consciousness, but for spiritual purposes, they limit the scope of their work and allow their manifested personalities to become the center of the aspirations of their disciples. They use personal relationships as channels to pass on their help to those aspirants who are connected with them. The masters are on the lookout for those who need their help, and no spiritual yearning is overlooked. They foster the advancement of all aspirants in various ways, although these ways may not be intelligible to others. The master's help. The help of the master consists in making the spiritual journey of the aspirant sure and in shortening the time that he might otherwise take for arriving at the goal. The aspirant may go far by independent search, but is unable to cross the sixth plane without the help of a master. Even on the intermediate planes, such help is valuable because the master prevents the aspirant from being detained and protects him from pitfalls. Kabir has compared the 3 stages of the path to the 3 phases of fire. Just as at first there is smoke, fire, then fire enveloped in smoke, and lastly fire without smoke. So the beginnings of the path are enveloped in ignorance. In the middle there is confused perception of the goal. And finally there is a realization of the truth without illusion. Since the path lies through illusions of many kinds, the aspirant is never safe without the guidance of the master, who knows the stages of the path and can take him through them. Before the goal of the inner eye, the mind conceives of the goal as the infinite.
So that's before the opening of the inner eye.
Before the opening of the inner eye, the mind conceives of the goal as the infinite. This conception is based upon some symbolic image of infinity, such as the sky or ocean, which suggests vastness. But such concepts have to be superseded by direct perception of the infinite. The aspirant sees the self directly when his inner eye is opened. But when this happens, the mind is dazed by the perception of the self. It loses the capacity to think clearly and mistakes the seeing of the self for realization. Thus, the illusion of being at the end of the path while traversing it. In Sufi, this particular part of the path is known as Mukam Afasan, or the abode of delusion. It is in such difficult phases of the path that the master gives a push to the aspirant so that he passes on instead of getting caught up on the way. There is danger to the aspirant of being detained on the inner planes, because each is alluring and a trap. But the master takes the aspirant through them without delay. The aspirant has to walk his own way, but the contribution of the master is in confirming and consolidating the previously acquired intuitions and perceptions, and in precipitating the aspirant's consciousness into the next stage. Unquestioning faith. As the master uses Maya to take the disciples out of Maya, and he is himself beyond good and evil, he may often require things that are unacceptable to the good sense of his disciples. The disciples should nonetheless follow the instructions of the master with implicit faith. The following well-known instances illustrate the point. Abraham, being called upon to sacrifice his son Isaac, was about to slaughter him when the boy was miraculously saved by being replaced by a goat. Shams-e-Tabriz ordered Maulana Rumi, his disciple, to fetch wine for him, which he complied with through Maulana at the time.
Though Maulana at the time.
Though Maulana at the time had a large following of Muslim divines. On account of his reputation as a great theologian of the Islamic world, and wine is religiously prohibited by Muslims. Hence, it was a crucial test for Maulana to carry a jar of wine through the streets. But he did it. Ghazala Shah was asked by a master who lived in a hut by the side of the river Ganges to get a vessel full of water from midstream for drinking. It was about midnight, and the river was in heavy flood because of the monsoon. The disciple hesitated, but gathered courage to attempt the impossible. No sooner had he stepped into the water than he witnessed a wonderful transformation of the scene. Instead of waves and the floods, the river turned into a thin stream, and the vessel to be filled almost touched the riverbed. The disciple crossed the river to the opposite bank in search of the midstream. While thus occupied, The master appeared and inquired the reason for his delay. The disciple explained that he could not find the mid-current, and the master allowed him to fill the vessels by handfuls, and himself helped. The master then left the disciple on some pretext, asking him to follow after filling the vessel. When Gausala Shah returned to the hut
I'm sorry,
with the,
Qos Ali Shah. Qos Ali. That's because we're recording.
could you say that one more time?
When Qos, Ghous, Qos Ali Shah.
When Ghaus Ali Shah
Uh-huh.
returned to the hut with a vessel full of water, he discovered that the master had never left the hut, but had been talking all the while.
Thank you, Ernie. Elizabeth, are you back at your machine yet?
Yes. Do I need to have my video on?
No.
Okay. These stories show how the master, on rare occasions, may use his occult powers to break down the ego of his disciples or help them. But the masters are very sparing in the use of such powers. Ordinarily, they secure their purposes through normal ways, but they exhibit understanding, sense of humor, unending patience, and consummate tact, and also take great trouble to help their disciples adjust themselves to the needs of any situation. The story of Bailul. The story of Bailul. The great
Bahlul.
Bailul,
Yes.
the story of Bailul. The great mystic Bailul wanted to contact certain notables of Persia for reasons of his own. The only way of doing so was to go to the prince's party, attended by these notables. Unfortunately, Bailul was bald-headed, and in those days, no one without hair was allowed to attend any party given by the prince, for the prince had lost his own hair. And to see others without hair prevented him from enjoying the party. And so when Bailul went to the party, he was thrown out. As the party lasted for 3 days, Bailul borrowed clothes and a wig and disguised himself and went again on the following day. No one recognized him in his fine clothes. He made a great impression and was liked so much that the prince invited him to sit near him. No sooner was Bailul seated than he winked at the prince. This the prince did not understand, but vaguely felt that such a gesture from an illustrious man must mean something important. Thinking that it merited a suitable response, he winked back. Those who were near saw this exchange of winking and were impelled to imitate it. Soon the winking spread throughout the company. Then Bailul cried, "Stop! Oh, you wise men, why do you wink?" And the notables replied, "We are winking because you great men were winking. We only imitate you." Then Bailul took off his wig and said, "We two are both bald. Imitate us." The notables went away and on the 3rd day returned with shaved heads. Then Bailul turned to the prince and said, "We are permanently bald. These men will have to shave their heads daily to remain bald." Thus, through his sense of humor, Bailul secured access to those whom he wanted to help. Dealing with failings. The master takes infinite pains to win the disciple for spiritual life. Since progress is secured only if love for the master is not allowed to decrease, he takes care to remove obstacles in the way of wholehearted devotion. And sometimes he is seen to humor the disciple, even to feed the ego of the disciple. But this is to give a long rope to ignorance in preparation for the final extinguishing of the ego. The master is not perturbed by the failings of the disciple, which he tolerates with patience and infinite capacity to wait, knowing that when the disciple gets established on the path, these failings will disappear. Once the master is satisfied that the disciple is firmly established, he cleanses the mind of the disciple of blemishes, and often achieves this at the risk of appearing ruthless. The usual method of the master, however, is as sweet and agreeable as it is effective. Solution of problems. Since the master is for the aspirant a symbol of the supreme self, the problem of adjustment with the master is the problem of realizing his own inner divinity and arriving at adjustment with all other forms of the supreme self. Through his allegiance to the master, the aspirant realizes that all problems of life are aspects of one problem, so that he arrives at integration, which is different from mere compromise. To be able to help the disciple achieve this difficult task, the master becomes the nucleus of the spiritual idealism of the aspirant, because intensive concentration of psychic energy is necessary if the aspirant is to break through the many barriers that lie between him and his goal. The supremacy of the claim of the master is not to be challenged, even by the reverence the disciple feels for masters other than the one who has accepted him. All masters are one in consciousness. One master is not greater than another. Disciple that I need some water, so maybe somebody else should read right now. Excuse me.
Sure. I'll just finish that sentence. One master is not greater than another. The disciple must, however, place his own master above other masters until he transcends the domain of duality and realizes unity.
Do you want me to continue or shall somebody
Yes,
else?
please. Yes, please.
Okay.
Another minute.
Psychic energy would be dissipated unless there was recognized a supremely imperative claim among the many claims of life. And exclusive concentration upon one master is usually indispensable for gathering up the psychic energy of the disciple. In rare cases, owing to special circumstances, the masters may decide to share the spiritual work in relation to a particular disciple. And there are cases of disciples who have had to affiliate themselves to two or more masters. But this is an exception rather than a rule, for masters arrange the distribution of their work so that there is no conflict of loyalties.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Marvin, please.
Ten, the qualifications of the aspirant. 1, entering into the realities of the inner life. Though God realization is the ultimate destiny of all, the mind of the worldly minded is darkened by accumulated sanskaras, which must be weakened even before the aspirant enters the path. The usual method of dispersing sanskaras is to follow religious rituals and ceremonies. This stage of external conformity to religious injunctions or traditions is known as the pursuit of Shariat or Karma Marga,
Mhm.
and covers such actions as the offering of daily prayers, the visiting of holy places, the performance of duties prescribed by scriptures, and the observance of recognized ethical codes. Though the stage of external conformity is useful as spiritual discipline, it is by no means free from evil effects, for it not only tends to make one dry, rigid, and mechanical, but it often nourishes some kind of subtle egotism.
Mhm.
Most persons are attached to the line of conformity because they find it to be the easiest way of placating an uneasy conscience. The soul may spend several lives in gathering the lessons of external conformity, but the time comes when it longs for the realities of the inner life. When the worldly man starts upon this search, he may be said to have become an aspirant. Like the insect, which through metamorphosis passes on to the next stage of existence, the soul transcends the phase of external conformity, Shariat or Karma Kanda, and enters upon the path of spiritual emancipation, Tarikat or Moksha Marga. In this higher phase, the soul is no longer satisfied by external conformity, but seeks to acquire the qualifications that belong to the inner life. Limitations of conventions.
Oh, hang on. Okay, good.
From the point of view of the realities of the inner life, a life that deviates from conformity may often be spiritually rich. In seeking conformity with established conventions, a man is almost always prone to a life of false or illusory values. What is conventionally recognized need not be spiritually sound. On the contrary, many conventions express illusory values, since they have come into existence as a result of the working of minds that are spiritually ignorant. Illusory values are conventional because they belong to a mentality that is most common. This does not mean that conventions necessarily embody illusory values. Some people adopt the unconventional for no other reason than that it is unusual and they are enabled to feel their separateness and difference from others and to delight in it. In this, there is no merit. Others become unconventional through the exercise of critical thought. Those who would transcend external conformity and enter into the life of inner realities must indeed develop the capacity to distinguish between false and true values. Discrimination. The rise from Shariat or Karma Marga to Tarikat or Moksha Marga is, however, not to be interpreted as a mere departure from external conformity. It is not a change from conventionality to idiosyncrasy, from the usual to the unusual, but a change from a life of thoughtless acceptance of traditions to a mode of being based upon thought. It is to change from implicit ignorance to critical thoughtfulness. At this stage of external conformity, spiritual ignorance is often so complete that people do not realize that they are ignorant. But when awakened, they begin by realizing the need for light and the effort to reach this light takes the form of discrimination between the lasting and the transitory, between the true and the false, the real and the unreal, the important and the unimportant. For the spiritual aspirant, however, it is not enough to have intellectual discrimination, though the basis of all further preparation. It yields its fruit only when the newly perceived values are brought into relation with practical life. In spirituality, what matters is not theory, but practice. The ideas, beliefs, opinions, views, or doctrines that a person may intellectually hold constitute a superficial layer of human personality. Sometimes a wrong view held with fervor may indirectly invite an experience which opens the gates of spiritual perception. Even at the stage of Shariat or Karma Marga, allegiance to religions is not infrequently a source of inspiration for selfless and noble acts. And though dogmas or creeds are blindly accepted, they may be held with dynamic fervor and enthusiasm. Dogmas and creeds have the distinct advantage, when embraced not only by the intellect, but also by the heart, of affecting more of the personality than theoretical opinions. But dogmas and creeds are as much a source of evil as of good, because in them the guiding vision is clouded by the suspension of critical thinking. If allegiance to creeds and dogmas has sometimes done good to the individual or to the community to which it belongs, it has more often done harm. Though the mind and heart are involved, both are functioning under the handicap of suspension of thought. Hence, dogmas and creeds do not contribute unmixed good. Putting theory into practice. When a person gives up accepted dogmas and creeds in favor of views and doctrines to which he has devoted thought, there is a certain advance insofar as his mind has now begun to think and to examine its beliefs. But very often, the newly held beliefs lack the fervor and enthusiasm that characterize allegiance to dogmas and creeds. If these newly held beliefs lack motive power, they belong only to superficiality, to the new life. The mind has been emancipated from the domination of uncultured emotion, but this is often achieved by sacrificing the cooperation of the heart. If the results of critical thought are to be spiritually fruitful, they must again invade and recapture the heart. In other words, the ideas that have been accepted after critical examination must be released in active life if they are to yield full benefit. In the process of practical life, they often undergo transformation and become interwoven with the fabric of life.
Thanks, Marvin. Mahu, could you unmute and continue for us?
The transition from external conformity, Shariat or Karma Marga, to the life of inner realities, which is Tariqat or Moksha Marga, involves two steps. One, freeing the mind from the inertia of uncritical acceptance based upon blind imitation and arousing it to critical thinking. And 2, bringing the results of critical thinking into practical life. To be spiritually fruitful, thinking must be not only critical, but creative. Critical and creative thinking leads to spiritual preparation by cultivating those qualities that contribute to the perfection and balancing of the mind and the heart and the release of divine life. 2, some divine qualities. If the inner life is to be harmonious and enlightened, divine qualities have to be developed and expressed in daily life. Any one quality may not seem to be extremely important, but it is necessary to consider it in relation with other qualities. In spiritual life, all qualities implemented and support each other, and their interconnection is vital. Every man is a rightful heir to the truth, but he who would inherit it must be spiritually prepared, and this spiritual preparation sometimes takes several lives of persistent effort. Therefore, one of the first requirements of the aspirant is that he should combine enthusiasm with patience. Once a man is determined to realize the truth, he finds that his path is beset with difficulties, and there are few who persist with a steady courage until the end. Accepting the world as it is. A spiritual effort demands not only physical endurance and courage, but forbearance and moral courage. The world is caught in Maya and false values. Therefore, the ways of the world run counter to the standards the aspirant has set for himself. If he turns away from the world, it does not help him. He will have to return to the world and develop the ability to face and accept it as it is. Very often his path lies through the world, which he has to serve despite not liking its ways, which he has to serve despite not liking its ways. If the aspirant is to love and serve the world, which does not understand him or is intolerant of him, he must develop forbearance. As the aspirant advances on the path, he acquires through contact with the master, an increasingly deeper understanding of love, which makes him sensitive to contempt, caloseness,
Callousness.
what?
Callousness.
Callousness, apathy, and hatred. This will try his forbearance to the uttermost. Even worldly men find the world indifferent or hostile, but their suffering is less acute because they do not expect anything from human nature and think these things inevitable. But the aspirant knows the hidden possibilities in every soul, and his suffering is acute. because he feels the gulf between that which is and that which might have been. Moral courage. Forbearance would be easy if the aspirant could accept the ways of the world. Loyalty to the truth of his own perception demands moral courage and readiness to face the criticism, scorn, and hatred of those who do not yet perceive the truth. I read this again. Loyalty to the truth of his own perception, demands moral courage and readiness to face the criticism, scorn, and hatred of those who do not yet perceive the truth. And though in this struggle he gets help from masters and co-aspirants, he has to develop the capacity for the truth single-handed without relying upon other help. This moral courage grows with confidence in oneself and the master. To love the world and serve it in the ways of the masters is not for the weak and faint-hearted. Freedom from worry. Moral courage and self-confidence are accompanied by freedom from worry. There are few things that exhaust energy so much as worry. The ego mind that identifies itself with its past gets entangled with it and keeps alive frustrated desires. In that way, worry continues to eat into the life of man. Worry is also experienced in relation to the future, and the mind seeks to justify itself in the attempt to prepare for anticipated situations. Worry is the product of imagination working under the stimulation of desires, living through sufferings that are our own creation. Worry is a serious dissipation of psychic energy. When the mind is gloomy, depressed, or disturbed, its action is chaotic and binding. The cure for worry and depression is detachment, the practice of separating oneself from the illusion of existence. Help from the master. The condition of progress on the path is guidance from the master according to the immediate needs of the aspirant. When the master expects what the master expects is that the aspirant will do his best. He does not expect immediate transformation of consciousness. Time is an important factor in spiritual advancement, as in material endeavors. And when the master has given a spiritual impetus to the aspirant, he waits until the help thus given is assimilated. Too much spirituality may have unhealthy reactions. The master selects the moment when his intervention is beneficial, and having intervened, he waits with patience till the aspirant needs further help.
Thanks, Mahu. Ernie, back to you. We'll just do short 4 or 5 minute reading each.
Ready? 3.
BJ is here, by the way.
3. Readiness to serve. The aspirant has always to be in readiness to serve the cause of humanity. He has to select that kind of work which he is qualified to do by his individual aptitude and abilities. But whatever service he can render, he must faithfully carry out. The trials through which he has to pass may be many, but the determination to serve remains unshaken. Yet he must not become attached to the idea that service brings results. He is willing to render service, no matter what the service, but is not bound by the false idea that I should have the credit.
So that's no matter what the sacrifice.
Thank you. I'll read that sentence again.
Thank you.
He is willing to render service no matter what the sacrifice, but is not bound by the false idea that I should have the credit. If the privilege of rendering a particular service falls to the lot of someone else, he is not envious. For in the spiritual life, there is no thought of self. The self in all its forms is eliminated. Service springs out of the spontaneity of freedom and the cooperative spirit in which there is no insistence upon the claims of I. If the aspirant is detached from his own works and their results, he becomes free from the opposites. The worldly minded realize their existence through achievements, which they judge tangible, so that they grasp at what they consider great things and avoid little things. But from the spiritual point of view, the so-called little things are often as important as the great things. Accepted values and fields of service. In a society dominated by material conceptions of life, service is interpreted as affording facilities for food or clothes, and some other physical necessity or welfare. In a society in which intellectual culture is appreciated, service is interpreted as spreading learning in different forms. In a society with a developed taste for beauty, service is interpreted in terms of the production and distribution of works of art. In a society responsive to the values of the heart, service is interpreted in terms of providing channels to facilitate the culture and expression of the heart. And in a society alive to the supreme importance of the life of the spirit, service is interpreted in terms of spiritual understanding. If there is no spiritual understanding, the desire for rendering service to others is limited. Service is of two kinds. In adding to the lives of others those things which are worthwhile, or in removing from the lives of others those handicaps which prevent them from having that which is worthwhile. In our ideas of things that are worthwhile, if our ideas of things that are worthwhile are small, the scope of possible service also becomes narrow.
Thank you, Ernie. BJ. Unmute yourself, BJ, please.
Sorry for that. Yeah, Jai Baba. Just as it is habitual to misjudge positive contribution, so it is usual to make a similar mistake in judging obstacles, handicaps, and adversities. It is a characteristic to allow more importance to external and tangible things than to what belongs to the inner life. War is considered to be a greater calamity than lives filled with hatred. Though, from the spiritual point of view, such lives are less evil.
Are not
War,
less evil.
uh, not less evil. Yeah. See, I read it again. War is considered to be a greater calamity than lives filled with hatred. Though from a spiritual point of view, such lives are not less evil. So hatred is no good. War assumes great importance because of its cruelty, but hatred is equally important even when not materialized in outward actions. Epidemics, injuries, and death invite more attention than the agonies of the heart, heavy with the burden of desire. But for the aspirant eager to serve without recognition or credit, everything that thwarts or perverts the release of life is worthy of attention, irrespective of whether it is great or small. Just as the building up or the collapse of empires has a place in the flow of human existence, the moment of sadness or sweetness in individual experience have their place in it. The importance of one is not to be measured in terms of the other. The aspirant looks at life as a whole. Service which springs from love. Even when the aspirant renders a service that is selfless, he keeps guard upon his mind. He must be humble, honest, and sincere. The service he renders must not be for the sake of show and should be an outcome of love. If the aspirant is inspired by love, his love will enable him to be in harmony with his co-workers without jealousy. If there is not harmony amongst co-workers, the service that is rendered falls short. Further, if the aspirant renders outward service without the spirit of love, he is merely acting from a sense of duty. In the world, people people work for pay. At best, it is a sense of duty that prompts them to be efficient. Their work does not have the inward beauty of work done out of love. Right. Yeah. Contact with the master. The aspirant can best maintain the practice of the true service if he has the good fortune to be in contact with the master. The master teaches not through preaching, but through example. And when the master is seen rendering service to humanity, the aspirant is quick to catch his spirit. Contact with the master is also helpful in encouraging the spirit of cooperation. The aspirant do the master's work, not their own, and they do it because they have been entrusted with it by the master. Right. They are free from ideas of individual merits, rights, and privileges. In cooperation of this kind, the aspirants serve each other because of the master's work is accepted by each as his own. Excuse me. In being useful to a co-aspirant, the aspirant is rendering a service to the master. But in such service, he knows that all are equal, and it is easy for him to cultivate the habit of serving in the spirit of humility. If service makes him proud, he knows that he might as well have not served. One of the most difficult things to learn is to render service without fuss and without pride. In the world of spirituality, humility counts as much as utility. Oh. When the master serves others, he does so not because he is attached to the work, but to help and to set his disciples the example of selfless service. In his feeling of oneness, the master knows himself to be at once the Lord of all and the servant of all. The aspirant realizes the ideal of true service when he has before him the example, excuse me, of the master. But the spiritual preparation of the aspirant is never complete until he has learned the art of rendering service with joy.
Thank you,
Faith, I would
Vijay.
like to read.
Faith, you'd like to read? Go ahead then.
Yeah, such an important thing. One of the most important qualifications is faith, of which there are three kinds: faith in oneself, faith in the master, faith in life. Wow. Faith is so indispensable that unless it is present in some degree, life is impossible. Children have a natural faith in their elders, looking to them for protection and help. This habit of trust persists until the shock of being deceived or exploited is received. Faith is strengthened when it finds those qualities which invite and confirm it. Being worthy of faith and having faith in others are complementary. They are the condition of the development of individual and collective life. Is that over?
No, this is a very important discourses, and Baba explained four of them: faith in oneself, faith in master. I think we should leave it till next week.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Thank
I
you,
would
thank you,
Well, we can
Vijay,
keep
and
going.
thank you all. Everybody can take a bow, and I'll
Hmm.
turn off the
I
recording.
did.
Eugene